Why play Duelists? Well, you might want to play an easy to stabilize comp, something you can play for a pretty reliable top 4. You have attack speed and AD scaling items that work particularly well with the 4 cost carry for the trait. You have lots of bows. This is a comp that loves to have bows for a lot of its itemizations, or you're starting the game with like that early Gwinsu or Kraken slam that you're looking to convert into a comp late game with. Or you have a niche reroll spot. We will mention some of the reroll lines here, but just note that this is going to be primarily focused on the Ashe carry comp. However, Duelist does require specific setups in order to actually function correctly. Additionally, it relies on scaling attack speed, so it can often lose to really heavy burst comps or comps that have very explosive damage. Additionally, it depends pretty heavily on certain combinations of fruits and units, which we'll talk about in the video. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. So on this channel, I'm normally doing daily TFT guides. Yesterday we did our rank up guide, which hopefully was a little bit helpful, but I also do patch notes and other stuff like that, as well as how to play guides. And then there's also the VOD channel. If we get to 1,000 subs on the VOD channel, I will do another RP giveaway. So please make sure to check out the VOD channel if you're looking for gameplay as well. So what are Duelists? Well, Duelist is a very easy trait. Basically, you just gain a bunch of attack speed. So Duelists gain attack speed on each attack, stacking up to 12 times. So 2 Duelists exist where you get 4%, then 4 Duelists with 7, and then 6 Duelists you get 10% stacking attack speed, which basically equates to being like 120% attack speed once you get your max stats. And you also gain 12% durability, so it makes the Duelist a little bit more tanky. This is a common thing you see with this trait, and usually it's focused more towards some of the melee or tank related units in the trait. But as you can see, there are 6 Duelists that exist, so in order to hit these 6 Duelists, you either need an emblem or you need to find all the Duelists and put them on your board. So when should you be playing Duelists? You need bows. You need to hit the bow items. A lot of times you're going to be playing around Ashe carry with this comp. There are some niche situations otherwise, which I will talk about in the video, but typically you're looking for those Gwinsu Krakens. You need a lot of bows, you need perfect items, or else the comp kind of falls apart. It's a little bit more particular of one of those play styles in order to get fully functioning. Additionally, artifacts, something like Flicker Blade, where it gives ramping up attack speed, broken in a comp like this. It's actually broken on almost all of the units in the comp. You can easily play in your mid game into your late game. So Flicker Blade, insanely good. Additionally, if you have a Duelist emblem, there are some high cap options with some of the legendary units, so I just wanted to put that out there and say, like, you know, if you're playing either Wandering Trainer or if you happen across the ability to make a Duelist emblem, which requires a frying pan, that is also good for the comp. Additionally, there are some related augments that work out really nicely. Something like Adaptive Style, where it basically gives you some extra AD and AP. They're not super important in order to like make sure that you're like strong. Is not like an essential thing to play the Duelist line, but it does help out like augments that are more tailored towards it, or like scale off of attack speed and auto attacking a bunch, because when you have a bunch of attack speed, your units are going to be attacking a bunch. So anything that scales like that, whether it be a specific augment or anything else, if it says like X attacks do this, probably good for the comp. Additionally, I put item augment here. I chose replication. This can be any item augment, even big grab bag. Anything that gives a reforger is really good. Sometimes you have really strong enablers. Like if you take replication, you just start the game off with a bow replication. You know that you're going to have enough bows in order to itemize your carries properly, and that can put you in a really good spot to play the comp. But additionally, things like reforgers that you can get rid of some of the bad components could help out quite a bit with the comp. So let's go through some unit introductions as well as unit itemizations. Well, first we'll just do a unit introduction, then I'll show the itemizations when we talk about the final boards. I think that'll be a little bit more nice as a flow. But basically with the Duelist, there are 6 of them. You have the 1 cost Duelist that is Kale. Kale does not have mana, so Kale basically just works off of auto attacking. So she's basically like auto attacker the unit. You want to just give her as much attack speed as possible in order to scale up her damage. Kale also scales with levels, so she goes from basically from her passive, then level 6 to level 9. The Kale becomes stronger as the game goes on. We'll talk slightly about Kale, but it won't be a big focus because usually when you're playing Kale, you're playing it in a different variation, not strictly as a Duelist style of board. You also have Kaisa. Kaisa as well is a really prominent reroll line, but that will be in a separate video when I make a how to play Supreme Cells video, because it's a little bit out there, but we will also mention it in this video. But Kaisa has scaling permanent attack damage per kills, so having a Kaisa early, even if you are playing around the Duelist line, could help out, just because she'll hit a little bit harder by getting some of those kills from early game. Next we have Viego. Viego's a little bit interesting. Viego is a melee carry, so he's a magic fighter in the front lines. Has a passive where his attacks deal extra magic damage. So he scales really well with AP, and then his active is basically like a rotating 3 combo attack that also does a little bit of damage as well. Next we have Udyr. Udyr is a mentor, so you can often get the mentor bonus for free with a board playing around Duelists, but also is Juggernaut and Duelist obviously in being a tank unit. Udyr has an insane scaling with attack speed because basically does these rapid fire attacks that heal himself as well as deal extra damage, and has like a little bit of a radius effect, makes him really good at just like constantly staying alive and just like healing up every time he gets his cast off once his attack speed ramps up. Sorry, I didn't mention Gangplank when I was talking about the 2 cost, but Gangplank exists. Gangplank can generate you some gold early and can often be a good item holder for that reason. But basically, like, everybody knows about Gangplank because he used to be busted at the start of the set. But if you didn't see him already, he just runs around. If he kills something, he has a little bit of like a chance to drop gold based on his AP scaling. And then finally, we have Ashe. Ashe is the monster of this trait. So basically, attack speed, the unit. That's what Ashe is. Basically, Ashe empowers her attacks as she fires these bonus arrows. The bonus arrows do damage, but it also scales with her attack speed. So you'll see like scales with AP, AD. That's common. You know, you have AP and AD scaling in most alts. But she's mostly primarily an AD unit. Then she also has this thing where the arrows that she shoots can also scale with the amount of attack speed that she has. So giving her a bunch of attack speed, which she gets from the Duelist trait as well as from auxiliary items, is going to make her hit like a truck because she's eventually going to just make a bunch of these arrows. And she also has an AoE effect where the damage gets split with random enemies. So she can actually hit a couple of extra units while she's doing her whole casting, which makes her really good at just like scaling and doing a bunch of damage. So let's talk about our final boards. So when we're talking about our final board, the final board actually looks something like this. Now this is a level 8 board, and I made the joke before if you guys watch my best comps on the patch. This comp is a monster of a comp. And it looks really silly because it's like, okay, why is Udyr up there? Why are there only 7 units? Is this a reroll comp? What are we talking about here, Fenrir? What is this comp? I'll tell you what this comp is. This comp is pure Gouda. It is cheese in its finest because basically, well, not really, but you know what I mean. I don't like these type of comps, but it is what it is. Basically, you're playing 7 units. The reason you're playing 7 units is because you need to hit a certain power up on Udyr in order to play the comp. What is that power up, you might ask? It is, if you have not, of course, many of you have probably already seen this. This comp existed last patch. I just, you know, wanted to see if it was going to get nerfed, and it kind of didn't. But Colossal, right? Colossal, your unit takes up 2 unit slots, and then they gain health, durability, and damage amp. So the health, durability, and damage amp, and you put that on the Udyr, and the Udyr becomes literally fucking unkillable. So basically what you're doing is, I'm going to put it as a thing just to make it very clear. You're fruiting your Udyr with Colossal. If you have Colossal on Udyr, you can only fit 7 units on level 8, so you're playing this as a level 8 comp where you're playing Udyr 2 as your main tank. This Udyr will be impossible to kill, but if you actually want him to not be able to die, you also want to itemize him in a very meaningful way. So he scales really well off his AD and his AP. So a good set of items that would be good for him are things that allow him to survive. So give him good HP scaling because he's going to have infinite HP because of Colossal. And things that also give him armor as well as some base stats to make use of his ult that keeps him alive for a very long time. So the best items, or typically considered the best items that you can put on him, is Sterix, Titans, whereas Titans, and Gargoyle. So basically, you're going to solo frontline this Udyr. This is all the frontline you need. This Udyr is going to scale, is going to live long enough, and it's going to scale really hard based off of just being Colossal, having the Duelist durability, having the Colossal durability, having the Colossal damage amp, and then you just want to convert that with Sterix, which gives him the AD, and it also gives him some HP, and then it also gives him this health shield that basically allows him to have a second reset life. So if he's about to die, he just gets this huge health shield that basically makes him impossible to kill, and it kind of resets and allows him to live a lot longer. because he's a duelist, he'll stack up Titans really well, either from getting attacked or attacking. So he's going to ramp up with a bunch of AD and AP, which in turn works really well with this kit. He's going to heal a bunch, and he's going to deal damage as well. So he's going to live very long with the Titans. It's actually a very good item on him because he makes use of all the stats really well, and also it gives him some armor and magic resist that scales well with the fact that he has a lot of HP, right? If you have a lot of HP, you give yourself armor, it makes you that much better of a tank. Lastly, usually the last item is gargoyles. You could play around with some of these items, by the way. There's not perfect. I think that there's other items that might be a little bit better. This is more of like an older build that's just like all reliable. But Titans also works really well because, like I said, you have a lot of HP. This just gives you a lot of armor, and it works really well. Gargoyle is the solo frontline style item. If you're solo frontline like this, and this is your only frontline unit, Gargoyle Stoneplate works really well because a lot of units will surround the Udyr, meaning that there'll be a lot of units that are attacking the Udyr, which will give him more armor and magic resist, because every enemy targeting will scale up the Gargoyle Stoneplate. So that works really well in these types of situations. Now, we talked about Udyr a lot. The comp is very reliant on both this Udyr and this Ashe. The Udyr, because you're basically, this is why I say it's a little bit cheesy, because you're relying on the fruit interaction with the Udyr kit, with the Udyr being a lower cost unit as a 2-star. This Udyr is going to be tankier than most 3-star units. I've had games where I had a Rammus 3 die before my enemy's Udyr, right? It's just annoying. It just is what it is. A 2-star is enough. It's not a reroll comp. You don't have to go for Udyr 3. 2-star Udyr is going to be tankier than most units in the game. Now, part of it is because you are compensating by using the power of Colossal, right? You're down a whole unit, right? So it's like a negative Fawn, a negative Tactician's Crown or whatever. So it's supposed to give you like a huge power boost. It's just like, it's very noticeable with this comp in particular because the Udyr makes great use of the other stats, and with particular items can do really amazing nasty things. So with that, you're basically going to go for Ashe carry. Ashe is going to be an absolute demon, and you just want to scale her up. Now, with 6 duelists, she already has a bunch of attack speed. So you might think to yourself, maybe she doesn't need any more attack speed. And I would say, you're probably wrong, because she scales so well with this attack speed that you actually just always want to build towards Guinsoo Krakens. You could prioritize Kraken first. Some people make Krakens first. Some people make Guinsoo first. I'm on the fan of like, you need both items for this unit to function correctly. Basically, the Ashe scales up the attack speed. When she's auto-attacking, when she's doing a bunch of attacks, she will scale up the AD with the Krakens. At one point, she will hit critical mass. And the whole point of this comp is, does your Ashe hit critical mass before the Udyr dies? And it usually comes down to matchups. Some matchups have heavy burst damage. For example, if you're playing this matchup and somebody else has like a Yuumi, and the Yuumi scales as well, the Yuumi might eventually burst down the Udyr before the Ashe has time to scale up and hit critical mass. It is what it is. But usually what you're trying to do is just stall out until the Ashe just kills everybody and does an amazing job. Now, with the Ashe, the third item is very flexible, but typically you'll see people put Edge of Night. Now, with this Ashe, at one point she's attacking so much and she has so many arrows flying that she just needs to live. And because your comp is very, like, you know, cheesy in the sense that you have this one front line that's basically like living forever, and your Ashe in the back line trying to scale up, having Edge of Night makes it really good for her, because not only will she not get sniped or killed early by accident if somebody else has AoE or there's some burst damage, it gives her survivability. The stats that it gives her are also fine because it gives her attack speed and it gives her some AD, AP, like all the stats are fine here. But the main thing is that you use it for survivability. Additionally, if this Ashe, let's say your whole board dies, and this Ashe is down to a 1v1 clutch, right? It's like your Ashe versus the enemy carry, and they try and burst you down. If your Edge of Night didn't proc yet, and it procs, the time, like it says in Edge of Night, become briefly untargetable. It's like a second or half a second you become untargetable. For that small period of time, this Ashe can literally clear an entire board with an ult. Like, I'm not even joking. So the Edge of Night actually works wonders in the clutch gene of making sure that when everything is dead and done and somebody tries to kill the Ashe, you know, all the Udyr's down, all these other shitters are down, and they try and kill the Ashe just clutches up with the Edge of Night. So it's actually a really good item to make. So I would recommend it, doing something like this almost always. I think it's going to be much more reliable and much more consistent. As your third item In the past, Guinsoo, it just got nerfed. Before, it used to be double Guinsoo Kraken just because of how well she scaled off attack speed. I think this patch, it's looking more like you put double Kraken just to scale her AD a little bit better because she has enough attack speed with the Duelist and the Guinsoo. But in most cases, it's these two items and then the last item you try and figure out. Even something like a Gunblade has also seen some play and does pretty good. So you can even make like a Gunblade if you have extra rod and you don't know what to do with it. In terms of prioritization, you usually don't want to make a third other damage item. Like, you know, if you have a leftover sword, a lot of times you're aiming for Edge of Night. IE is like, it's like okay, but it's really not. She just doesn't work with crit really well. She used to be bugged, by the way, and then they said they fixed the bug, but IE still looks pretty bad on her. So like, you don't have to build like these well-rounded builds a lot of the times with her because of how skewed she is in scaling with the attack speed. So usually go for double Kraken or this for the clutch gene, right? The Edge of Night. But of course, whatever items you have left, you can just make the items and just have some success, right? You can even make like a Last Whisper. Who cares, right? Make your items. I'm not saying like you have to greed for certain items. I'm just saying like just know in the back of your head like that's the essential kit. Last item a little bit flexible. Aim for like either Guinsoo Kraken or Edge of Night, preferably Edge of Night. That would be my recommendation. Also with Udyr, you could go for other items, but typically you want at least one thing that gives him some shielding. I've seen Protector Vow Udyr also be okay in place of Sterix, but typically these two items are the ones that give a lot of stats, so it works really well. And as you can see, you need infinite bows. Bow, and even more bows are good. So bow is the name of this comp. This is a comp you play when you have a lot of bows. In terms of the rest of the board, Set just gives Soul Fighter, which could help out. Viego could do really well if you have extra items. These other duelists do so much damage, and this Udyr is taking so much of the aggro away that a lot of times like a random Viego or even like these random shitters can do a lot of damage. So even Viego items can work out well in a lot of cases. So don't sleep on the rest of the board. They can actually clutch up a little bit as well. But Set basically allows the Viego to do a little bit more with the Soul Fighter, and also has Juggernaut synergy to help with the Udyr, obviously. If you want as well, you can try and bait your Set a little bit further out, just because when he dies, the Udyr recovers some HP because of the Juggernaut trait. So, you know, you want the Set to die. You want the Set to die before the Udyr dies, because if the Udyr dies and heals the Set, that's kind of a bit of a throw. So sometimes you might see the Set be placed like a little bit more awkwardly, but that's fine. That's more of an optimization type of thing. Ashe, in terms of Ashe, what's it called? Fruits. There are quite a few. They're all pretty fine. One of them that comes to mind is Shadow Clone, because the other Ashe also scales and does a lot of damage. So Shadow Clone really allows you to like pop off really hard. So Shadow Clone is a good option, but like I said, pretty much anything that you're missing, even stuff like Bludgeoner, Kahuna Huna, there's quite a few options for the Ashe in order to just like scale up her damage. But one of the ones that you usually see more often than not is Shadow Clone, just because it allows you to like have a second Ashe that can maybe clutch up. In some cases, especially if you have the Edge of Night build, it works really nicely with the Shadow Clone, because they try and kill your first Ashe, Edge of Night procs, now she does a bunch of damage. They try and kill your second Ashe, Edge of Night proc, she does a bunch of damage. They go back to your first Ashe, uh-oh, now that Ashe is dead, but then the other Ashe clutches. You know, it's kind of like a ping pong effect right at the end of the game, and stalling for that 1 or 2 extra seconds is often the critical stage in sort of winning a lot of the fights, because that's how Duelist is. They have so much attack speed that they are just rapid fire bursting damage towards the end of the fight. So even stalling out for 1 or a half second longer is going to make all the difference in order for you to win out on a fight. When you're playing this comp, you could also level. There is another duelist we haven't talked about, and that is Lee Sin. You could easily play Lee Sin in place of another one of these duelists, usually whichever one you have the least upgrades for. If you're making it to level 9, Kale does get the level 9 bonus, and sometimes could be a really good item holder for certain items. So for example, like if you have Morello, because she has the wave that hits multiple enemies, you can put it on a level 9 Kale, and she'll actually do some work. But of course, whichever one you want to replace, you can replace with Duelist Lee Sin. It's not the greatest of units, but he is really good. I think Juggernaut's a little bit better, and you could just play an extra Juggernaut, however. Additionally, if you get Lee Sin, another tech that you can do is actually double Colossal on level 9. So basically, you could just use another unit slot, and then you could hit Colossal on Lee Sin, and go for more tankiness and power on the Udyr, and just like sack your Ashe power power up instead. This is actually a really viable option, and it often can help you win the game and cap really high. So Lee Sin, you can just replace whoever. Usually I end up replacing Kale or Kaisa, just because I like having the extra body of a front line in the form of the Gangplank. But of course, that's fine. You can just do that, and you could also go for double Colossal if you have fruit removers and you think that you can run it. Additionally, one thing I want to mention is Duelist Emblem. So Duelist Emblem actually works really well on some other units. Additionally, if you're leveling up, you can also cap out on Xayah or TF, because they're both units that work well in a setup like this. But Duelist Emblem on TF is absolutely absurdly broken. If you read Duelist Emblem's ability, attacks deal 12 bonus true damage, plus 6 true damage each time the targeted was damaged by this effect. TF hits everybody, because he just has cards that fly around everywhere. He scales really well off attack speed. So a lot of times Duelist Emblem TF is an insane win condition, which makes Duelist Emblem even like a takeable like augment. Like if you see Duelist Emblem as an option, you can often take it if you're far enough ahead and you know that you're going to hit a TF, because Duelist Emblem on TF is like so absurdly broken. It's also really good on Xayah, because if she has a bunch of attack speed, she can summon more plants, and the plants also scale with attack speed, so you have like an extra little juicer in the back that you can use to kind of bait if there's like, you know, positioning that you have to play around. But just to mention, Duelist Emblem, pretty important with this comp as well. When we're talking about some final boards as well, I wanted to make mention of this board. This is the old way to play Ashe before Colossal Udyr was discovered as being like this cheesy bullshit. I say that in an endearing way. If you're a big fan of Colossal Udyr, you know, it is what it is, but I've been losing my mind over the past 4 weeks that it's still not nerfed, because it dictates a lot of what, like a lot of comps right now, the comps that are good are the comps that are able to kill Udyr. A lot of comps that don't have enough burst damage to kill the Udyr are usually comps that are not viable right now because of how dominant this comp is. So just keep that in mind. If you're not playing this comp, you should start playing this comp, right? It is very, very strong. But this is the old way to play Ashe. The idea was that you would basically have a similar build, but you would just scale by means of having a front line that was really hard to kill. So you'd basically just play 6 Juggernaut and 2 Duelists, and then the Ashe would just ramp up with the Guinsoo. The problem is this build takes significantly longer for the Ashe to ramp up because you have so much less Duelist, right? You don't get the insane 6 Duelist, 10% attack speed stacking 12 times. So a lot of times this is the preferred way to play Ashe. You very rarely, if ever, play this variation. I just want to show it to you because it was originally common. Also, to make this video a bit future proof, if Colossal Udyr becomes a bit like they get rid of it, then this will be the go-to option most of the time, because this will actually support you having a reliable front line to allow the Ashe to scale. But basically the idea is just insane front line, Ashe in the backline ramping up. This one also makes use of Crystal Gambit, so you can get a couple little extra golds or cash outs. You can play any Crystal Gambit unit in place of the Xayah, but then once you have the Xayah, you can play the Xayah. Additionally, some variations of this play this version, but what they do is they also play what's it called? They also play like 5 Crystal Gambit. This is kind of like a Hail Mary in my opinion, right? I do not think that 5 Crystal Gambit Ashe is a viable or really good option. Now, this line could be good if you're strong early, if you're playing it from ahead. It's good because the 5 Crystal Gambit can cash you out Duelist emblems. So a lot of times if you're playing this variation, you can get the Duelist emblems, which then puts you in a really good spot to eventually just play this board, because this board is just stronger. Because set 5 Crystal Gambit doesn't scale you enough, in my opinion, to make it worthwhile versus this variation. Right, this variation is very inexpensive, it's very reliable, and it's very good to go. It's very, like, you're very good right out the gate. This one, it's like you scale, unless you just start getting dropped like insane things, or you get dropped like the Ornn artifacts or stuff like that. A lot of times this will feel a little bit lackluster, and you can often troll your game trying to chase like a high. Of course, this also works really well into a Crystal Gambit line. If you get a Crystal Gambit +1, you can play 7 Crystal Gambit. That's obviously an insane win condition that you can easily play around the same way. I made a Crystal Gambit video already. You can check out that Crystal Gambit video if you want to know more about that. Additionally, I want to mention some of the reroll lines. There is a lot of Kaisa reroll lines that are pretty viable. If you ever have a worth the wait Kaisa or a worth the wait Kale, for example, like either of these 2 boards, you can often play them almost in place of like the Ashe or alongside the Ashe as dual carries with the standard 6 Duelist Colossal Udyr board, or even like a Juggernaut, sorry, now it's all Crystal Gambit, but a Juggernaut build kind of like this, you can also play them. If you're just hitting Kai'Sa reroll, usually you want other stuff, like you want to play Supreme Cell and not play deep in the Duelist. And similarly with Kale, typically you're playing it from like a spot where you're trying to go fast 9, and then you're trying to cap out really high around like Varus and a Juggernaut frontline. So it's a little bit different what these two units want particularly. But if you have it for free, like if you have like worth the wait Kale and you don't really want to play the Kale reroll line, or if you have a worth the wait Kai'Sa or a Caretaker's Kai'Sa, and you don't know what to do about that, you can play this Duelist and have them as secondary carries as well. Just something to keep in mind, something to make note of. Another option that I want to talk about is Viego. Viego reroll is not quite there yet on the current patch, but in lieu of this maybe being something later and wanting to talk about it in this video, there are some things that are looking kind of almost really broken. So for example, Viego with range seems to be particularly nice and particularly good if you look at artifact stats. Basically, whenever you have a unit that scales their attacks based on a stat, so in this case his passive, attacks deal bonus magic damage. Then he also has a bunch of auto attacks. Sorry, his next 3 attacks, like his active, is based off his auto attacks. So he's really good at scaling these with range. And if you can find something like Stretchy Arms, where you gain attack speed and gain infinite range. Stretchy Arms with something like a Sniper's Emblem. Basically, now that Viego doesn't have to build towards survivability, and instead you can build towards pure damage. You can go something like this with JG. And then your last item, it depends what you go for. If you're going for a full scaling, you can go Gwynsu. But you can also go for like a QSS just to drive up that crit chance, to give you some more burst, like early attack speed. But basically, something like this works really well because every single one of his auto attacks is going to do a massive amount of damage. And now you can scale up his damage and keep him as a backline unit where he's a lot safer. There's lots of times where this is something that exists in a set where you turn a frontline unit to a backline unit. It worked the same way with like Gangplank, but Gangplank was broken, but that also had to do with his execution effect, or his like killing effect with his active ability. But Viego as well can work really well like this, so keep it in mind. I wouldn't necessarily, like, you can try it out, of course, and then you can play it similarly with like a Duelist reroll line, like just playing 6 Duelists on level 7, right? You don't even need the Colossal Udyr, and then when you get to level 8 you can make Udyr Colossal, or you can drop the Juggernaut, right? You can do some interchangeable stuff like that and just play a similar board. But I would just say be cautious on the current patch 15.3. Just keep it in the back of your mind, right? If Viego gets buffed, this might be something that pops up, and I might have to make a separate video on it. But because I'm doing the Duelist video now, you know, the set's still young, there's still 3 months to it. I just wanted to mention, keep your eyes peeled. This is probably something that will come up eventually if Viego becomes any shape or form buffed. And it's almost there already. You might see it in a couple of your games, and you might be like, what the fuck is this? This looks broken. And it probably is. One last thing that I think there was one last thing. I'm trying to see. Oh yeah, sorry. The last thing, if you're ever playing this comp and you see a Flicker Blades, or sorry, if you're ever playing anything and you see a Flicker Blades, Duelists love Flicker Blades. Basically, they have a bunch of base attack speed that you get from the Duelist trait. Flicker Blades basically makes it so you gain stacking attack speed. It's absolutely broken. Especially with units that have a lot of base attack speed like Duelists. This can work on almost every unit and be absolutely broken on the line. So Flicker Blades, huge item for the Ashe or anybody involved. Additionally, there's also Fishbones that makes the Ashe just kill everything on the board. It works really well with stall related comps where you're ramping up your attack speed, because as you stall out the front line, the Fishbones has more chances that the random enemy is going to be a key damage dealer or backline unit on an opponent's board. So Fishbones also works really well on the Ashe. Just keep those builds in mind, keep those items in mind. They are very important to know. Early game boards. So this is one that I think is really common for a lot of people. A lot of times when you're starting the game off, one of the best early game boards that you can have is like a Gnar opener with a Gwynsu. Gnar opener with a Gwynsu, especially if you have an item like Golden Edge. A lot of times this is like the go-to fast 9 setup, because basically this Gnar ramps up Golden Edge really well and gives you a lot of extra gold. But Gnar with anything that gives him attack speed is really good for like stage 2 and stage 3. So a lot of times you can build towards like Ashe items on a Gnar opener. Your Gnar opener a lot of times will look something along the lines of like the Juggernaut slash Luchador setup, where you usually have like a Mundo and a Gnar. But basically Gnar with any front line can also work. There's also Gnar Protectors, which is kind of like almost a reroll line now, but you can easily play something like this where you activate Crew, make this Malphite real tanky. But a lot of times, good item holder is a Gnar, and a lot of times having a Gnar with a Guinsoo early, especially with certain power-ups, can basically set you up really well to play towards those late game units. Additionally, whenever you're playing any comp, like a lot of times you want to be starting out with a bow. This comp requires so many bows that a lot of times if you don't start with a bow, it might be a little bit awkward to play towards it. That being said, it is a really strong comp, and it does support multiple people. One key part about this comp is that if you look at the front line, it is a 3-cost unit, and you're also only playing 7 units on your board. So this comp is dirt cheap. It is very inexpensive. A lot of times this Udyr can also, if other people don't have upgraded units, if they didn't hit on their roll downs, you don't even need the Ashe 2 to be stable on stage 4 a lot of the time, because the Udyr will be so hard to kill, especially if people aren't itemizing properly, right? This Udyr, you need to have anti-heal and you need to have shred or sundering, right? If you don't have anti-heal, this Udyr will basically never die. So in a lot of lobbies where people aren't optimizing their items, or even if they don't optimize their boards or roll down on their boards, this Udyr will be impossible to kill. So it's extremely cheap to stabilize. You just need a copy of Ashe and an upgraded Udyr. Now obviously the Udyr might be hard to find, but in some cases it'll be great. You can also just stay on level 8 with this comp, because you don't need to really level 4 anything. You can go for Viego 3 and Udyr 3 and just stay on level 8 rolling until you hit your Ashe 2, and then decide if you want to roll anymore. Because if you hit Udyr 3, then sure as hell that guy's never dying. It's Udyr 3 with Colossal. What are we talking about here? So there's a lot of room to cap this board really high, just staying on level 8. And because of that, it is extremely cheap. And because it's extremely cheap, it means that a lot of people usually end up playing towards it. So you might be in a lobby where like there's 3 Ashe players, and you can't really fault them. A lot of times it's because all you need is an Udyr 2-star. There's enough Udyrs to go around in most lobbies, and you can often stabilize with an Ashe 1. It's often okay. What I would always recommend is that, you know, it's still a 4-cost comp. You might struggle to top 4 if there's too many Ashe players. So just keep that in mind. Just be a little bit careful out there. But just know it is a really inexpensive comp for what it's worth, and you can do really well with it. So that's always something that's important to note. Conditions for success: lots of bows. That's the biggest thing. You need as many bows as possible. You need bows for your front line, bows for your back line, bows for Kraken, bow for Guinsoo, bow for Titans, bow for anti-heal. If you make a red buff, it's like you need bows. That's all you have to think about with this comp. Also, you don't want to be super contested. I was just talking about it, but just note, right, there is the chance that, you know, it might be very contested, because a lot of people, you know, you make Guinsoo and they all want to play towards the strong comp. But just know it can support multiple people. It's not a comp where you have to be completely uncontested. You're not digging for a 5 cost. It's not something that caps really low. A lot of times you can win out just by being level 8 and just rolling to 0 every single turn. It's just really important. Just make sure that you're not super contested. Also, pay attention to comps that are playing like Mentor Udyr, for example, because sometimes the only way you bot forward with this comp a lot of times is if you have number 1, bad item quality, or number 2, you don't hit Udyr fast enough. Sometimes you don't hit Udyr 2 and Udyr 1 because you're already playing with the thin margins of him being a solo frontline 3 cost with a particular power up. If you miss on any of that, if you don't have the upgrades or the items or the setup for it, it can collapse very fast. So that's usually where the sore points come for this comp. Ashe items are also very particular. Guinsoo Kraken. It's very rare that you can do well with the Ashe comp if you don't have both the Guinsoo and the Kraken. Also, not too many burst comps. This is something that you might find out the hard way. Right now, it feels like there's not many reliable comps to play around. Just by nature of the patch and just the way like things have kind of shaped out. So if there are like heavy burst comps, something like a Yuumi, for example, a lot of times your Udyr can just die and you can have a hard time like having a strong board because you just don't have enough units to deal with the onslaught of frontline slash backline units. But just be aware of that. If there are a lot of burst comps, just note that you might need a little bit more to stabilize. You might need that Ashe 2 because you won't be able to ramp up fast enough, things like that. Also, good use of fruit removers. The fruits are pretty important with this comp, especially you need Colossal on Udyr. It's essential or else it doesn't function. If you're not playing the Udyr variation, a lot of the other variations I was talking about were not particularly strong, but you still want to have good fruit removers to guarantee that you can have a good Ashe fruit, because sometimes they're a little bit awkward on her as well. One thing I want to note, I just put the little disclaimer because it is on patch 15.3. I waited from 15.2 because, you know, there was another update to the meta. There was a D patch. This is where this comp kind of started to shine. So I waited until 15.3 to see how it's doing so I can make this guide. If it gets nerfed in the future, if there's more nerfs and you're watching this guide from a later patch beyond 15.3, just note, like, you know, if it's not as good or if Colossal Udyr gets axed, there's other variations that will probably work. Or if that variation is a little bit weaker, then you want to play it from more of an uncontested spot. You want to make sure that you're hitting your units. And in some cases, if things get really badly nerfed, it might be more essential to roll for Udyr 3 and stay on level 8 and cap out around that. These are things that might be in the future. I'm just trying to future-proof the video as much as possible. But right now, it's a very safe comp, a very safe and reliable top 4. If nobody in your lobby is playing Ashe, you can be the Ashe player, and you'll often have pretty good success with it. In my opinion, or how I would play the game from my approach. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was a fun video. As per usual, make sure to like and subscribe. We're going to do some more how to play guides. I'm probably going to go over some of the reroll lines, like the Kaisa reroll line next, because that one is a little bit, like, you know, it has a lot of moving parts to it as well, and just talk about Supreme Cells in general with like Darius and Akali as well. So that might be the next one. I'm also working on the item guide. I want to have it out this week, but I just got a little bit preoccupied and busy, and then I made the rank up guide instead. So I kind of like things got a little bit shuffled around, especially with the new patch. I'm just trying to keep up. So item guide should be out. I'll try and do it this weekend, but if not, it'll be early next week. That's going to be the next big ticket set of videos. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and see ya. Bye-bye.